Okay, I'm gonna try and keep this short. I feel like I normally talk about this for like 30, 40 minutes. Also, I made a mistake, so I have to start another video. This is like take 3. I can't help it. I can't help it. Yeah. So I moved back from Reading. I just like end up getting sucked into the return conference by Naomi, who apparently didn't like me at the time. Like we said, we established that's to take a position to commit in your heart you don't like somebody is already abnormal. But so we just had a couple of different moments, like while I was here, just like connecting, like, oh, I was working at Return in close proximity. She started doing prayer meetings at her house for the underground church in the Middle East, and then that transitioned into watching through the prophetic history together with a group and just praying through. I like was going to a bunch of different Bible studies and stuff throughout the week, and we had a Revelation reading room in the prayer room where we would just read through the whole book of Revelation aloud. Naomi essentially just starts showing up at all of those things, like unprompted, out of nowhere. Except for friendship group, she technically was invited to that friendship group I think before I was, and was there before I was, but started coming consistently after I started going, but also return ended, which return ending is probably a huge part. But yeah, and so we just had a couple of really sweet different moments, and just like fun, like mostly just fun hangout moments, where we both were like, oh, hey, like this person's pretty cool, this person's pretty cool. But there was, okay, I think I would butcher the story of Miss Katie and Abby at for visiting in town at dinner for Lucas and Zoe. So like Naomi, you can totally just fix whatever I make a mistake on, but functionally there's like this like horribly awkward social scenario that Naomi gets thrust into by one of the sweetest people in the world, like we'd think just didn't realize like how the conversation came up. But Naomi essentially just gets all these questions about her ex-boyfriend out of nowhere. And Lucas, we're at Lucas's house. It's Abby, her mom, Miss Katie, it's me, and it's Naomi, and it's Lucas and Zoe, So we're all hanging out. Out of nowhere, unprompted, Miss Katie looks over at Naomi and is like, hey, like, how's Guy doing, her ex-boyfriend? And she's like, I don't know, and Lucas is trying to, like, do his best to help out as well. She's like, oh, like, I think she's back in Brazil, and like, Lucas is like, yeah, like, he just moved back to Brazil. And Miss Katie just goes like, did he move to Brazil because you broke his little heart? And then we're all like, oh, no, and Lucas is doing his best. He's doing his best to try and engineer the social situation away from this. And he just goes like, oh man, like, I love Guy. Guy's like the best guy that I know. And again, unprompted, Miss Katie goes, Lucas, how could you say that when Ben's right here? And I'm like, I'm okay. I'm a little happy she says that in front of Naomi. I'm gonna be honest. I'm pretty happy that she said that in front of Naomi. But also, I'm like, what the? This is like you don't expect this to be the turn of events. And then Lucas, kind of in this still amorphous, nebulous, like, oh, I'm trying to help out. I don't know what's going on here. Goes, I think Ben would agree that Guy's a better man than him. And I am suddenly put in a no-win scenario where I'm either going to have to come off as prideful, or I'm going to have to say in front of Naomi, her ex-boyfriend is a better man than I am. And that's just the weirdest position you can be in when this girl is really cute and you're thinking about dating her. And so I just kind of say, so she likes to say, she's like, she noticed, she was like, oh, hey, like, how's he going to respond to this, like, complex social situation, So I essentially say, I'm like, I feel uncomfortable answering that question. There's really no good way to respond. Which it's just the way that I responded apparently was, like, really good. And so she was just like, oh, hey, like, he's good with words, or, like, knows how to, like, handle himself in a tense moment. I don't know, But so apparently, after that night, Naomi finally realized that she liked me. And from that point on, she just like, and we're going to tell the story, she just started pursuing me, which is really cool. I didn't see it coming. She just like started texting me out of nowhere and would try to like kind of engineer some scenarios where we would all be hanging out with like a group. I think this might've been before, but she was hanging out with my roommate Nate. Like they were like a group of them were gonna go on a walk, and she goes and picks up Nate. Nate gets in the car and she's like, "Hey, is Ben home?" And it's like, "Oh yeah." It's like, "Does he want to come?" You know. But so like me and Naomi, like Naomi starts kind of texting me out of nowhere, and we just have some like really good conversations and stuff for the next 2 weeks. And then I guess the next big thing would be we have a like Sunday night prophetic history prayerful watch through thing. And Naomi had been hosting it. I come in, her mom was in town, and I go in to sit down. And Naomi usually sits on the floor. And I notice that there's a spot open next to me on the couch. And so I'm like, hey, if Naomi takes that spot, that probably means something. It doesn't mean everything, but it means something. And so apparently while I was gone, her and Nate had the most awkward interaction in the history of the world about where she wanted to sit there, but he like took the seat, and then he's like dragging out like, oh, did you want to sit here? And so like what ends up happening though is that we end up sitting next to each other. Nate goes sit somewhere else. We end up sitting next to each other. You know, and she's like sitting next to me, not just next to me, but like next to me, and I'm like, hey, that's awesome. And you know, like she'll turn over and like she'll ask, like say something to me about, oh, like, you know, like this part of the prophetic history is like this. I'm just like, you know, and so it was great. It was a little, you know, like fun moment. But so I'm like sitting there, oh, hey, like she maybe might be interested in me. I'm just going to make sure I'm super intentional when I say goodbye, you know? And so, you know, like I help clean up. I'm one of the, not like one of the only people left, but I'm one of the last people that are there. And so I give her like a quick hug, you know, and I'm just like, oh, like, thank you so much for hosting. It's like I don't know, like a 15-second intentional like goodbye. And Naomi just does this. She's like, she doesn't say anything. I don't get a response. And so I'm sitting there like, was that too forward? Was that too much of a side hug? Or like, did I say something that was weird, you know? But she like was in a deer in the headlights, like thinking that her heart was on her sleeve. And I'm sitting there like, I have no idea if this girl likes me. And so I end up going home and having like a really funny, awkward, like in my own head text conversation with her. That was also sweet and fun. But so anyway, we basically just have had a couple of really good conversations. That next day, she puts me in a group text with my roommate Nate, and she says what sounds like to me the worst possible excuse in the history of the world to hang out with somebody that you like. You know, she says like, she texts us both, and she's like, hey, like sometimes I invite myself over to people's houses and do work. Can I come over and do work at your guys' place? Which apparently she actually does, but that sounds like the cheapest excuse out of the history of the world, like to come over and see somebody, you know. And I had just gotten out of the gym, and so I'm like, oh, this is perfect. This works out great, you know. And so and Nate can't be there, and so it'll just be me. And so I'm like, this is another reason. If she says she doesn't want to come, or if she says she wants to come, I'm like, oh, wow, this is like even more signals, you know, which to her is like the 60th or 70th signal she's been trying to send to me, you know. And so Nate can't be there. If she says yes and wants to come over, I'm still trying to be intentional. Like, oh, like, hey, like she said she wanted to come over and work. It's like the first 15 minutes are like me just being like, oh, hey, like this thing, you know, and then like back to working, you know, and then like maybe a few minutes later, like saying something. I'm like, oh, like, I just don't want to bother you, you know, I know you're trying to do something. And the way that Naomi describes it is that she came over and she brought her computer, sat down, and just was like this. Just like waiting for me to talk to her. And so we just have like a 6-hour like conversation, like just talking about like laughing, talking about the Lord, like just, it was so good. So sweet. Yeah, and so like by the end of it, it just was like, it was like so much fun. I think I showed her like a old, like really cheesy poem of mine that they put in a collection of like 7th grader poems that was like so bad. And yeah, and then I just want to make sure, like, my notes that I'm gonna be tracking. But yeah, and so then, but so basically, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this was so much fun. This was great. This was absolutely incredible. She sends me a message that night, and we're texting back and forth. She sends me a message, basically trying, like, she says just flat out, she's like, I would take, like I would give up productivity for hanging out with you anytime. And I was like, that feels nice. That just the serotonin and the dopamine, just like that's just great. that felt really good coming from Naomi, pregnant. I'm like, come on. And so it was really cool. Tuesday, I'm at this point, I'm like thinking I'm gonna ask Naomi out. I'm like considering it, going back and forth, and then also kind of just like dumbly insecure, just like, oh, does she actually like me, you know? And so Tuesday is the next day. I end up writing a haiku that I'm like planning. I'm gonna ask Naomi out. The haiku, I'm gonna do it on Wednesday night. So I'm gonna do it tomorrow night because that's when we have friendship group, and that's when we're gonna have time together. Tuesday, I'm gonna be busy all day. I'm not gonna have a good time to actually do it. Wednesday night, we're gonna see each other. I'm gonna try and find a moment to just like say like get her, and like say, hey, like, do you want a date? I was way more eloquent, like deep, heartfelt, and then haiku. Which the haiku, I had written some more like generous in the sense of like, oh, gracious is a better word, because like the last line of the haiku sounds a little bit like more like demanding than I was intending, but I also was getting some strong signals, so I thought that it would land well, and then it was clearly going to land well afterwards. But the haiku was the plan was, I'm going to have this like heartfelt, like, man, like, I respect how much you love the Lord, and like, I think you're amazing, and like blah 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 blah, and then it's going to end it with a haiku that was like, what's up, Naomi? I considered waiting more or longer. I can't remember how many syllables. I can't remember which version is 7 syllables. What's up, Naomi? I considered waiting longer. We should clearly date. And so I had a couple of like other lines for the last one that were like, do you want to date, or something like that. That was a little bit less like, do this now. But I stuck with the first one because the original, because what ended up happening is that whole day, I am helping out with a thing. I end up making time to go to a Revelation reading group. I have to leave it early, though. Naomi looked disappointed when I left it early, which I logged away for later because I thought that was cool. And I'm spending the entire night after I finish with what I have to do trying to find an excuse to text her, and I can't come up with anything. I'm not clever enough. She texts me, and she says, hey, Ben, I think you looked really sharp in the prayer room today. Parentheses, I like your shoes. Ha 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 ha. And so I was like, oh my gosh. This is clear. This is becoming more and more clear. And so I'm like responding, I'm like, and she'll probably want to tell this, like, because she's really picky about like, she's like, oh, like, this is the wording, she's really proud of how she did it, which, I like, it worked. It ended up being really good. But I'm like joking, responding, and I was like, oh, like, I was like, hey, like, I thought you looked really cute too. And I was like, I thought, I was trying to find an excuse to text you, but I didn't know what to say. I'm like, what am I going to ask for? Like transcripts of our Bible study, like afterwards, like, that doesn't make any sense. And so she goes into this whole thing where she's just like, I feel like I should maybe pause and just let you guys like pause the video and she can just say this, because like I don't think I'm gonna say it well. You could skip through. I don't know. She goes on this whole thing. That's basically just like, oh, like if I do transcripts, it's gonna cost you something, and I'm just like, oh, like, what are your prices? I'm like, like, I'm just flirting back and forth, I'm like, what's your prices for summaries instead, And so she goes like, oh, I like, as much as my bleeding heart would like to give away my service or give away these services for free, I value my contributions. But I do have bartering options for those who don't have the money like to pay, but they have valuable commodities, such as if you were to ask me out, would more than cover it. Which is crazy. So she basically asked me out. She asked me out. She basically, I asked her out more officially, but she basically asked me out, which is crazy. Really, really cool. And so I was like, I think I texted her. I was like, I don't think I've ever been happier to be beaten to the punch. I don't know if I said something like that necessarily, but it was like kind of that idea. And I was like, man, I was really looking forward to seeing you at the McNulty's tomorrow, or like later tonight, because I think she sent that text Wednesday morning. It's like, I was really looking forward to seeing you at the McNulty's tonight. I wrote a haiku and everything. It's like, do you have any time beforehand? So we ended up meeting like instead of meeting the McNulty's is like 7:30, we ended up meeting at like 4 o'clock. And we like, so first off, holy cow, like when Naomi, that entire time where we were talking was wild. Like it felt like moving through water. Like she, one, just is so attractive and gorgeous, and we're both just like sitting there like, holy cow. Like it felt surreal. Like it like in moving through water, it doesn't also include the dynamic of like warmth and like feeling like the love of the Lord, you know, like just when she walked in, it was so sweet. It was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in my life. I was like, holy cow, the entire time. And so we just talked for 6 straight hours again. And like, it was really great. First off, in my mind, so again, flashback to when Naomi just didn't know how to say goodbye to me, that prophetic history night where I was like, hey, like, you know, like all this sweet stuff, and like see you later. And she's just like, I have no frame of reference for being able to do that to an individual, let alone Naomi freaking Grace Brockenhoff, who is the most intelligent and capable and like, just, I don't know, like just legit person like I feel like I've ever met. And so to have any sort of influence on her mental faculties like that is like nowhere on my radar at all. And so we're having a conversation. Okay, so yeah, so we're having a conversation, and we're just trying to get to know each other. This like after we're saying like, hey, like, oh, like, hey, like, do you want to date me? Yeah, I want to date you. So we're just like, holy cow, both of us like each other, and we're saying yes. I'm just asking her questions like, oh, hey, like, you know, I'm like trying to find something to say. So I'm like, hey, like, what's your middle name? And she goes, do you want to guess? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Does it begin with a consonant? I can't remember if I asked if it begins with a consonant or a vowel. But I asked that, like, what's the first letter? Like, is it the first letter a consonant, you know? And she goes, yes. You know, it's like, yes, like, it was like, I'm sitting there thinking like, oh, is she like trying to think of something funny, or is she like kind of tired? I'm like, there in no point in my brain am I thinking that she's like having a hard time functioning, you know, because she thinks I'm cute. Which is, it's just, again, is so wild. It was so fun. And there was another moment for me too, where I'm just sitting there. And this has never happened to me before in my life. Like, I'm sitting there, I'm in the middle of conversation, and I do that kind of whole thing where I'm like, you know, like I'm looking over here and I'm talking, and I look back over, and I forgot. I looked back over and I completely forgot the rest of my sentence. And I was just like, wow, you're really pretty. Like mid-sentence, I'm just like, yeah, so there's this, wow, you're really pretty. And so it was wild. It was wild. It was just really wild. But so yeah, we both were on the same page. We both wanted to start dating then, and yeah. And so the next question, which it's already been 18 minutes for this video, along with the other ones. The last question is to tell about the proposal. I'll try to keep this short. I love our story. I think Naomi is the freaking greatest person in the world, and the fact that I get to marry her is insane. Okay, so for the proposal, this requires backstory. We had set January 22nd was going to be our conversation to talk about next steps. You know, like, what does engagement mean to one another? When are we, what's our timelines? What does that look like? You know, we make it to January 10th. We talked about it like maybe at the beginning of January, the beginning of December, on the advice of Dr. Charles Matier. Just let Les know. He said that we should have the conversation sooner, which I was feeling, but I was like, oh, you know, I'm just gonna let Naomi, you know. So we decided to have the conversation on January 10th, you know, and it's like so good. It's a great conversation. We're both like, hey, like we're thinking like the other person is like amazing, and we want to, you know, like, I'm like, but we're like, oh, like we're both like, oh, I think like April would be a great month to get engaged, and, you know, like maybe sometime around October getting married and all this, you know, we're on the same page, you know. That's January 10th. Right around January 12th, Naomi just starts cracking jokes like, man, Ben, just stop dragging your feet and propose to me already. I'm like, 2 days ago, I just got the like permission, essentially, that this is even a good idea. No. 2 days ago, we just opened the idea that, like, hey, we're both thinking this. And now I'm being heckled for dragging my feet. And so within 2 weeks, with constant heckling, within 2 weeks, I have talked to both of her parents for permission, ordered a ring. I don't know how to move faster than that while still being intentional and in doing it as well as I can, you know? And so and literally like, and so a month later is like when I end up proposing. So it's like January 10th, we have the conversation saying April's a good month. February 15th, I propose. Like, that's pretty dang good. So basically, the way it all happened is that she was going to get headshots with Julia to like, I think it was like for FPD or just for fundraising stuff or ministry just in general. And like the dates ended up clashing. There was some sort of scheduling conflict and then it ended up not happening. And so I'm trying to orchestrate a moment with Julia about like, hey, like, how can we do this? Like, how can I like get you there, like, because you're a good friend, like a really, really close friend of hers. And so like if I were to get a random photographer, I would feel weird for somebody else to be there. But if it was somebody that she was really close to, I think that it would be okay. And plus we really want to, I think, remember the moment. So Julia's like, oh, hey, like, you know, we could do the FPD, like, picture time, you know, whatever. And I was like, oh, that'd be great. I can come like 5 minutes later so that you guys still get some good shots. And I can just hijack this thing and turn it into a proposal. And so we just start, you know, like building this plan. They land on a day that works, that like everything seems to work well. And Naomi just keeps trying to ruin it. She's like, oh, like, we were going to go to Lawrence right after her photos. She's like, oh, you should just like come and pick me up from the photo shoot and whatever, which logistically makes sense. I get it. It's a great idea. Not when I'm trying to propose, though. It's supposed to be surprised that I'm there at all. And so that, you know, and so I'm having to like, and I suck at lying. And so I'm having to come up with excuses as to why I can't be there that don't exist. And so I mix around some like dates stuff where I'm like, oh, like this thing that's actually happening on this day is going to be happening on the day of the photo. So I have to stay late at the Psalms class I'm helping out with. Then also she gets sick the day of with like 100+ degree fever or something like that. And now I'm the dude that's always like, oh, hey, like you should rest and take it easy. And I'm like, no, like I think you should go take the photos. Like, I don't think you're going to regret it, you know? And so, okay, also important point to know, literally like 3 days before we get engaged, she's just like sitting there on the couch, like we're like, you know, we're hanging out together. And she's just like, like, I just want to be engaged to you. And I'm like, oh, if you like internally, I'm just like, if you just waited 3 more days. And not to mention, I tell her, I'm like I'm moving as fast as like humanly possible. The fact that this is like, I'm moving quickly. I don't think that this could go better if it was faster, you know? But so she's sick the day of. I'm like heavily saying you should go to get these photos. I actually am having it was interesting. I was having a hard time connecting with my heart like that whole day. And I was worried. I was like, oh man, like am I moving too quickly? Like it's important for me to be able to enter into this moment and feel it and be here, you know? Oh, the lighting. But so I wrote down what I was going to say. I read through it once. I felt the presence of the Lord. I took some time. I was praying and I was prayerfully writing. And then, when I tried to go through it like the second or third time, I just wasn't feeling anything. And so I drove, I got flowers from Trader Joe's, and I drive across the street from this park. And the spot that I chose was a place that we had a conversation where Naomi shared just kind of a vulnerable-ish part of her history. And it was just like so sweet. It was just a moment of bringing me into something. And plus it's just gorgeous. It's like, there's like a bench looking over like a little, it's not like a lake, it's like a pond, or I don't know, whatever you want to say, but like the sun sets across, and so it's just this really, really sweet like area, and like has a little bit of a history with us. And so I end up parking across the street from the park, and have this just beautiful moment of praying and connecting with the Lord. And it was one of the straightest lines of like just to the Father that I've ever felt in my life, where I just felt the weight of like, man, like God, I would have lived my own life differently. I would have I would have lived in rebellion from you. Like I would have, like, there's nowhere in my own decisions could I have gotten myself here with this person, you know, like I couldn't have been in Kansas City and done this, you know, like it was only because you've been so kind with me. Like you not only saved me, you brought me here, kind of like that whole feeling. Yeah. And so just was like, and like just was like singing and praying and worshiping for like maybe 15-20 minutes before they come over. And then they get there. I told Julia to change my name in her phone to her boyfriend at the time, now fiance, Caleb, so that she could like text me, message me, or like I could call or something like that, and she'd be like, oh, like this is Caleb, you know? And so I wait for them to walk down and start taking pictures, and I'm like, hey, like make sure her back's towards me because there's like no cover. It's like a long trail that you can see from the parking lot to where they were, and so I have like 2 to 3 minutes of walking where I could just be spotted in the open. And so they're taking pictures. I'm trying to kind of quickly walk over, but not like make any noise or anything like that. And so I get maybe as far as that tree. I don't know if you can even see it. That tree with the green box on it away. Maybe a little farther than that. Probably a little farther than that, actually. There's no cover anywhere. I guess Julia tells Naomi that they should take some without the jacket. I don't know. Naomi is walking towards Julia, which is away from me, to put her jacket on a tree, which means she's going to have to turn around and walk back to her spot. There's nowhere to hide, and I am a large person. So I end up like doing a little like like semi-quiet like hobble and trying to hide behind a tree by like putting my back behind it, just like and she and I'm so clearly visible. I'm like poking out on both sides of this tree, you know? She doesn't see me. I'm like, I don't know when I can turn around. I eventually just like decide to turn around. And then I walk up to her, and I kind of make some noise with my feet when I'm like 10-15 feet away, so that it's not just like, hey, and she's like, you know. So yeah, and then I got down on one knee. I say some really sweet things and am crying. She says the sweetest thing, which was yes, and is crying. And the main theme and idea from what I had said, which I don't even know if she remembers, was just this whole idea that like there are like hundreds of moments in secret between me and the Lord, praying and asking him, you know, about like for my wife and who my future marriage is, you know, and the fact that all of those like not just those secret moments, but far above and beyond all of those decisions that I made in secret to work on my heart, because there's one day I'm going to be married and that I want to love this person well, you know, or like man, like I'm going to lean into the Lord because I know in loving him, that being the first and primary thing, but in loving him that I also will love well later in my life. Like so many different conversations like that. I'm like, and it's like it's standing there in front of me, you know? And so yeah, so that's kind of the story. Oh, sorry, really important part. We kissed. I said this before. She said wow like 3 times immediately afterwards. She was like, wow, which just is really cool. And then we spent like the entire hour drive out to see her family, between like deep, heartfelt conversations about what we want our lives to look like and just the sweetness of the Lord, how much we love each other. And then that intermittently interrupted by her going like, you know. And so and then we had a really, really cool moment where it was the first time I met her older brother Jeff, and she told him a couple different times, like, hey, like you should meet Ben before, you know, like while he's still my boyfriend, you know. And so she, like, we walk in. This is actually important too because of you, Kelly, because of her mom. We walk in and Naomi is like hugs Jeff. It's like, oh, like, hey, like, hey, Jeff, like, this is my fiance, and just is like, you know. And then Kelly Callie goes, what? And smacks Naomi's arm, grabs her hand, and I was like, let me see. And so it was so much fun. It was a ton of fun. Yeah, I think that's good. This has been 30 minutes. I told you. this is about right. I love you, Naomi. I'm so excited for our lives together. I hope this was helpful. Yeah.